us, small island developing states, have faced very unique challenges and vulnerabilities when it comes to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Starting with Maria and just transition from Botswana, is it? Yes. So the conversation around just transition is a present conversation. It is a conversation that's a must-have, because the balance that the conversation tries to address is it feasible? Is it reasonable? Is it bankable for us for the transition to happen from fossil fuel to green energy? And let me give you a practical example from Kenya. It is possible to run our grid using green energy, renewable energy. 93% of Kenya's grid is green or renewable. So are we funding it? Can we support our development? Yes. So, but we need a candid conversation as to what happens to countries that have huge resources of fossil fuel energy, and how do we transition those that are exploiting those resources at the moment into the green space. One of the aspects that we must address is the aspect of financing and technology. Those two will unlock the potential we have in green energy if we have technologies, and we're very happy a lot of movement has gone in developing technologies that would help us unlock the renewable energy potentials, but also financing. And that is why we are having a very big conversation about financing. So those two will make it easier for us to have that conversation about just transition. On the aspect of migration, Kenya has already signed into the Kampala Declaration. I did speak to President Museveni this morning about it, because it's going to be part of the conversation we are going to have in the summit. This summit will provide an opportunity for countries that haven't signed into the Kampala Declaration. That makes it much more easier for victims of floods, droughts, victims of climate change to find safe haven. We must, as humanity, realize that climate change is not, for example, our making as Africa. It is not the making of ordinary citizens. We're here together, and we must make it much more easy for people to find safe haven when they are victims of climate change, whether it's drought, whether it is cyclones, whether it is what you're talking about, the flood, the mudslides in Rwanda, the big challenge we had in Mozambique, in the western part of Kenya, or for that matter, the drought in Kenya, and Somalia, and Ethiopia, where we lost close to 9.5 million heads of livestock in the Horn of Africa. We must make it much more easy for us to attend to those who have to move away from situations that endanger life and endanger their existence. And I hope that we will be able to persuade more countries to sign on so that we can provide an easier ecosystem of working together, collaborating, and making sure that we provide avenues for people to migrate when that is necessary, but in a manner that is responsible. And finally, the smaller states, the island states, who have the largest risk because of climate change. For example, the Caribbean, Mauritius, Madagascar, Comoros. These are islands that, if we do not deal with the challenge of climate change, could easily be submerged. And therefore, we must, as humanity, realize the danger these islands face and work with them to make sure that we address the challenges of climate change. And that is why, for example, we are having this inaugural conference in Nairobi. This is the first time as Africa we are coming together to discuss our ideas, our suggestions, bring our assets on the table, and provide solutions on this very challenge that is threatening humanity. And the island states, the people suffering drought, the people suffering cyclones, those who are at risk in the Sahel and many of the other areas will be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just on Maria's point, on the just energy transition. Energy transition doesn't have to be just. It needs to be inclusive. It needs to make sure that it is something that allows us to develop, not with what we don't have, but we have to develop with what we have. So let me take it's of energy that we've been talking about. Yes, we have that potential. Nobody eats potential. We have to unlock that potential. And for us at the African Development Bank, today, we devote 87% of all of our financing on energy generation to renewable energy. So one of our biggest programs we have is Desert to Power, which is a $20 billion investment we are making all across 11 countries with the Sahelian zone, which includes, Mr. President, also northern part of Kenya. And I'm just coming also from Eritrea, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, all those areas, and the rest of the Sahelian countries. $20 billion investment that will allow us to construct 10,000 megawatts of solar and allow us to provide electricity for 250 million people. And when it is finished, it will be the largest solar zone in the world. And so we are trying to make sure we can harness the power of the sun for our development. So we are doing our best on that. We are doing our best in the issue of hydro. We're working, of course, we have to do the big projects in Inga, which we have to actually do that. We're working with you here on geothermal, with the Menengai and all the others that you have. So all I'm trying to say is that we are maximizing on everything we have. But there must be realism. We cannot power African economies only on renewable energy. Look, today, so we should move away from ideological stuff and be practical. Europe is buying gas all across Africa. Why? Because they have to stabilize their grid. In Africa, I'm looking at, even in Kenya, you had power cuts because of the variability of the power. Other countries have power cuts because renewable energy is highly variable. Now, we need it, but we need to have stable grids to run industries, the kind of industries, Mr. President, that you are talking about. So that means we don't have nuclear. The only thing we have is gas. And therefore, natural gas must be part of the energy mix of Africa to be able to, first and foremost, drive stability of our grid. It's faster to have gas to power, modular systems, and so on. And it's very, very important. And now, I know others, some people will say, oh, okay, President of African Development Bank, wait. Are you not going to be contributing to global emissions? The answer to that is a big no. The analysis that we have done at the African Development Bank, that the Global Center on Adaptation has done, and the International Energy Agency, Mr. President, we found that if Africa were to use today all of its natural gas to do just power, you know how much we will add to global emissions? 0.5%. That's it. And so we contributed only 3% since 1890 in terms of emissions globally. Give us room to develop. Give us space to be able to industrialize. We are doing the maximum we can with renewable energy, and we will continue to do that. Reality is, renewable alone will not power this continent. We have to have stable grid. That's very, very important. and it's not going to add to any global, it's not going to add to any global emissions. Now, when